In this video, we will highlight what a small business needs to consider in order to be more resilient. There are essentially 4 stages that a business should consider in order to better their chances of surviving a crisis. These are 1. Planning. This is where you identify threats specific to your business and address them with plans. 2. Implementation. This is where you implement the plans that were created in step 1. 3. Testing and exercises. This step requires you to test and/or exercise those plans to ensure they work and everyone knows their roles and responsibilities. 4. Program improvement. This is where you modify the plans and process based on real events or based on results from step 3. We will now look at each of these in more detail. It is important to note that cyber-related threats might be just one of several hazards that your business needs to address during the planning stage. Step 1. Planning. In your overall program management process, the planning phase should take an all-hazards approach. There are many different threats or hazards. The probability that a specific hazard will impact your business is hard to determine. That's why it's important to consider many different threats and hazards, and the likelihood they will occur. Your planning process should also identify scenarios to consider for emergency planning. Strategies for prevention deterrence and risk mitigation should be developed as part of the planning process. Threats are hazards that are classified as probable, and those hazards that could cause injury, property damage, business disruption, or environmental impact should be addressed. In developing an all-hazards preparedness plan, potential hazards should be identified, vulnerabilities assessed, and potential impacts analyzed. The risk assessment identifies threats or hazards and opportunities for hazard prevention, deterrence, and risk mitigation. For each hazard, there are many possible scenarios that could unfold depending on timing, magnitude, and location of the hazard. As you conduct the risk assessment, look for vulnerabilities, weaknesses, that could make an asset more susceptible to damage from a hazard. Vulnerabilities include deficiencies in building construction, process systems, security, data storage and backup, third-party vendors, protection systems, and loss prevention programs. They contribute to the severity of damage when an incident occurs. The Business Impact Analysis, BIA, identifies time-sensitive or critical processes, and the financial and operational impacts resulting from disruption of those business processes. The BIA also gathers information about resources requirements to support the time-sensitive or critical business processes. This information is useful in making informed decisions regarding investments to offset risks and avoid business disruptions. Step 2. Implementation. You have completed the first step, planning, in the program management cycle. It is now time to move to Step 2, the implementation phase. Implementation of the preparedness program includes identifying and assessing resources, writing plans, developing a system to manage incidents, and training employees so they can execute plans. Senior management should consider developing, at a minimum, an emergency response plan, a crisis communication plan, a business continuity plan, and an IT disaster recovery plan, or even a specific cybersecurity plan if your business requires one. Emergency response plan. The first step when developing an emergency response plan is to conduct a risk assessment to identify potential emergency scenarios. An understanding of what can happen will enable you to determine resource requirements and to develop plans and procedures to prepare your business. The emergency plan should be consistent with your performance objectives. The actions taken in the initial minutes of an emergency are critical. A prompt warning to employees to evacuate, shelter, or lockdown can save lives. A call for help to public emergency services that provides full and accurate information will help the dispatcher send the right responders and equipment. And today, more and more businesses are coming under cyber attacks, resulting in data breaches to their own and customers' confidential information. Even if you follow recommended best practices in your IT operations, you might still get breached. Therefore, it is prudent to include response actions for a data breach or create a specific incident action plan that covers the response to the breach of systems. Crisis communication plan. An important component of the preparedness program is the crisis communication plan. A business must be able to respond promptly accurately and confidently during an emergency in the hours and days that follow. Many different audiences, stakeholders must be reached with information specific to their interests and needs. The image of the business can be positively or negatively impacted by public perceptions of the handling of the incident. Understanding potential audiences is key, as each audience wants to know, how does it affect me? Guidance for scripting messages that are specific to the interests of the audience is another element of the plan. Business Continuity Plan, BCP. When business is disrupted, it can cost money. Lost revenues plus extra expenses mean reduced profits. Insurance does not cover all costs and cannot replace customers that defect to the competition. A business continuity plan to continue business is essential, and an Information Technology Disaster Recovery Plan, ITDRP, should also be developed in conjunction with the business continuity plan. Priorities and recovery time objectives for information technology should be developed during the business impact analysis. Technology recovery strategies should be developed to restore hardware, applications, and data in time to meet the needs of the business recovery. Resource management and training. There are many resources required for the preparedness program, and training is essential to ensure that everyone knows what to do when an emergency of disruption of business operations occurs. Step 3. Testing and exercises. You have completed the first and second steps, planning and implementation, in the program management cycle. It is now time to move to Step 3, the testing and exercise phase. Your plans may have been developed by persons who are not responsible for implementing them during an actual crisis. Even if this is not the case, it is prudent to test and exercise your plans to evaluate the effectiveness of your preparedness program, make sure employees know what to do, and find if there are any gaps or unforeseen consequences to the actions laid out in the plans. There are many benefits to testing and exercises. Train personnel, clarify roles and responsibilities. Reinforce knowledge of procedures, facilities, systems, and equipment. Improve individual performance and organizational coordination and communications. Evaluate policies, plans, procedures, and the knowledge and skills of team members. Reveal weaknesses, conflicts, and resource gaps. Comply with local laws, codes, and regulations. Gain recognition for the emergency management and business continuity program. Testing the plan. When you hear the word testing, you may think about a pass-fail evaluation. But this is not the case when the objective is to test your plan. In the process of testing, you may find that there are parts of your preparedness program that will not work in practice. Consider a recovery strategy that requires relocating to another facility and configuring equipment at that facility. Can equipment at the alternate facility be configured in time to meet the planned recovery time objective? Can alarm systems be heard and understood throughout the building to warn all employees to take protective action? If you have a data breach, can members of your emergency response or business continuity teams be alerted to respond in the middle of the night? Are planned responses prepared to provide tailored and timely answers to selected stakeholders on the nature and severity of the breach? Testing is necessary to determine whether or not the various parts of the preparedness program will work. Exercises. When you think about exercises, physical fitness to improve strength, flexibility, and overall health comes to mind. Exercising the preparedness program helps to improve the overall strength of the preparedness program and the ability of team members to perform their roles and to carry out their responsibilities. There are several different types of exercises that can help you to evaluate your program and its capability to protect your employees, facilities, business operations, and the environment. Exercises are a great method to evaluate the preparedness program, identify planning and procedural deficiencies, test or validate recently changed procedures or plans, clarify roles and responsibilities, obtain participant feedback and recommendations for program improvement, measure improvement compared to performance objectives, improve coordination between internal and external teams, organizations, and entities, validate training and education, increase awareness and understanding of hazards and the potential impacts of hazards, assess the capabilities of existing resources and identify needed resources. You have completed steps 1 through 3, planning, implementation, and testing and exercises in the program management cycle. It is now time to move to step 4, the program improvement phase. In 1993, when terrorists attacked the World Trade Center for the first time, financial services company Morgan Stanley learned a life-saving lesson. It took the company 4 hours that day to evacuate its employees, some of whom had to walk down 60 or more flights of stairs to safety. While none of Morgan Stanley's employees were killed in the attack, the company's management decided its disaster plan just wasn't good enough. Morgan Stanley took a close look at its operation, analyzed the potential disaster risk, and developed a multifaceted disaster plan. On September 11, 2001, the planning and practice paid off. Immediately after the first hijacked plane struck One World Trade Center, Morgan Stanley security executives ordered the company's 3,800 employees to evacuate from World Trade Center buildings 2 and 5. This time, it took them just 45 minutes to get out to safety. Morgan Stanley still lost 13 people on September 11th, but many more could have died if the company had not had a solid disaster plan that was practiced over and over again. In making a commitment to prepare its most valuable asset, its people, Morgan Stanley ensured the firm's future. There are opportunities for program improvement following an actual incident. A critique or hot wash should be conducted to assess the response to the incident. Lessons to be learned from incidents that occur within the community, within the business's industry, or nationally can identify needs for preparedness program changes. Best practices and instructional guidance published by trade associations, professional societies, newsletters, and government websites can be resources to evaluate and improve your preparedness program. Businesses should improve the effectiveness of their preparedness programs through review of policies, performance objectives, program implementation, and changes resulting from preventative and corrective actions. Gaps and deficiencies identified during reviews should be recorded and addressed through a corrective action program. Reviews, evaluations, and improvements should be documented and maintained on file. Triggers for program review. Reviews of the preparedness program should be conducted periodically and whenever the effectiveness of the program is questioned. The goal of program reviews is to provide assurance that the program meets the needs of the business and complies with regulations.